my form 1, which has the open file dialog, and let's look at the properties of this thing, because I want it to allow me for multiple files, multi-select. Now, of course, there's all these other fields that we had to fill out, okay? Now, let me see what that might look like. Maybe I can access that from something else. Let me see this form chart display. If I look at it, no, that's not the one. Here is what I might do. If you have your form 1 from your first project, which is this guy here, what you can do sometimes is say, hey, I want to grab this guy. Okay, well, I don't want both of them. I just want this guy. I want to Control C it, and then you can say, let's go into my other project. I need to get to its form right here, and you might say, I want to actually copy that in here. So here it is, my open file dialog load ticker is here, and if I now go look at the properties of this guy, it's got, remember all the things we had the filters and so forth and so on. We see that? If you have your first project, okay, you can grab that, any control or group of controls from that first project, and you can bring it, as I did a Control C, I copied it, and then I pasted it into this project here. So that means that I will no longer need open file dialog 1 because I have the thing I want with all the proper settings, okay? So this guy here, I'm going to delete, boom. I now have this one, it has all the properties because I just copied it. And I just need to make sure that when I look at my code over here, wherever my code is, that I am referring to it appropriately. So let me go back to this. Let's go to Form 1 Designer. And sorry, it looks like I have to go to Form 1. I need where is the code for it? Form 1 CS, view code. Here it is. And in this guy here, now I have an error because it says, hey, what happened to open file dialog 1? You say, no, I just switched it over. I got rid of open file dialog 1. I grabbed the copy of the open file dialog from project 1 because that open file dialog has everything set up, okay? And I don't want to have to redo everything, so I'd rather take that, set it up, and it was called open file dialog underscore something. Let's see if this is gonna help me, underscore, come on. It's not helping me, so let's try again, open, and here it is, open file dialog, right over here at the top, on the second one, load ticker. Now it knows about that. I know that will have lost some people, so anybody need for me to show you again how we fix that? Look on your screen, she's asked me, so was it the same thing? Okay, well, let me answer her. You go to your open file dialog. You have the first project. Did you bring up the chart on that? Okay, so there is an open file dialog that you have in here. Okay, where is it? It's down there. You got to select the open file dialog. Right there. Control C or copy. And now in your project 2, you want to go into your form and you want to click in the form, click on the form just to make sure you select the form and do a paste. Go ahead. Now it's got that, and you'll notice that, click back on that, the new one, all the properties that you want are there. Whereas if you look at this, it doesn't have all the properties. You'd have to redo the filters, you'd have to do the multi-select, all of that. And this now, you can just delete it. Okay? However, if you try to build, you're going to get an error because this thing is still looking for, don't even do that, build it. Let it tell you where the error is. Don't go look for them yourself, you might miss something. Okay, so it's controlling, say, no, Yeah, you never want to use the one, and look at the thing, see it says that doesn't exist, double click it, it should get you into the code. Okay. Now, that you need to change to the new name of the one you have, that you added. And if you don't know what the name is, you can say open file dialog underscore. I would get rid of the other stuff. Put a space after, that's why it didn't give you any information. Now get rid of the load, just to show you how it works. Now get rid of the underscore. Now put underscore. It still didn't give you anything. It should normally give you the name, but you know what the name is. So, and once you do that, build it, and there should not be a problem. Now you said you had something a little different, so what's the difference?
I was just wondering, you didn't have to change if the name was the same for open file dialog?
No, you don't have to change the name because now you're in a different form. So again, this is now a different class. And this is where I had asked the question, what is a form underscore display? You said it's an object. I said no, it's a class. You instantiate the class, put it in some variable, and you can show the variable. Well, if I have two different classes, okay, the open file dialog in project 1, the open file dialog in project 2, they're two different classes, and therefore, or if we're talking about the form, you can have the same member variables in both of them. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you have, let's say you do a two-dimensional point class. Tell me the two variables that you will probably have in there. X and Y, okay. Now I say, hey, let's make a three-dimensional point class. What other variables you're gonna have? X, Y, Z. You don't care that you have an X. Nah, okay. All right. Okay, so at this point, we have, and we expect that our open file dialog will be like what we had before. So let's run, let's see what our open file dialog looks like.
You have to close the program.
The project is still running, yes, yes. Thank you. Put a note here. Let's go over here. In fact, I have multiple of these running. Isn't that? Yeah, because I have all these forms. Okay, so let me run this guy again, except that we copied the file dialog. Now, when I say load stop, what do we get? Yeah, we get that new, nicer looking form dialog because that one has the read-only and show read-only, which are this thing here. And if you look, it looks a little different than the first time we used the open file dialog. Also, this one should have, yeah, the multi-select enabled, so I'm able to select multiple ones, okay? And it's telling me all these guys, so now if I say open, yes, anything happen? Well, I know why there would be nothing. Can someone tell me why nothing happened? Go ahead.
Because you didn't change your event handler.
That's right, I did not put my event handler, okay? So the event handler is this guy file okay. However, when I have my open file dialog, I have to make sure I have the right one. It's this guy here, okay, this I'm going to get rid of for the moment. I don't want to be confused. Here's my chart display. Okay, so this guy here will open this open file dialog. Here, and here it is. Now I need to make sure that my events, it did not have the file OK event. Now, don't do anything on the file OK. We do have the event in our code. It's just that now we learn another lesson. If you copy a control from one form to another, and this makes total sense, what are you going to get along with the form? Well, the way it looks, things like location, all those basic properties, they'll come along because those properties actually travel with the control. However, what about the event handler? That you're not gonna have go with you because the event handlers deal with our members of the form, and they might refer to some variables in the other form. I just grabbed the open file dialog and I put it in this other form. that other form may not have any event handlers, so I don't get the event handlers with me. So that's what happened here. We copied the open file dialog over to not this guy, sorry. We copied it over with this. Here's the open file dialog, but we did not put a file OK event handler. Now, you might think, well, I'm going to double click, I'm going to create an event handler, and I'll just write it because it's only one line of code. It's a line of code that simply says open file dialog. Well, you don't have to because, again, remember, you have, I got to find it, you have that code right there, and this thing is smart enough so that when you go and you look at the open file dialog and the properties, you can go to the side. Okay, if you click here, you see that little arrow? You click on it, and it's going to tell you all the methods of the form that would fit the prototype. Meaning, all of these methods you could use as an event handler. Well, we already have ours, and in fact, here it is, right there. And therefore, I can say, yeah, that's what I want. It's already there, so let's pick that. And at this point, you should have your event handler. And what I can do, let me clear things up a bit here, there's a lot of stuff going on. I can put a breakpoint here to make sure that indeed I go into that event handler. Okay, so let's run it with the debugger. It's running. I say load stock. Again, we're getting the file dialog, and we didn't have to do much. We just had to go grab it, okay, from the other project. I can select 3 of these guys, and I can say open, and boom, we are now in the open file dialog. Now, what it will do, the first thing it does, it instantiates a form, okay, for chart display. And you will see, if you go into the application, you'll notice the application only has this form, that's it, okay? Now, if I say show by saying step over, now this thing will presumably have shown, and if I look here, you can now see that there is a form chart display CS. It's showing me something weird, but there is another form that has been shown. Then I say, let's create yet another form, G, okay? If I go look, there is still nothing showing, but now when I say to show G, okay, if I look here, now it says you have 3 forms in the application. The original form, then the form F, which it is a bit messed up in what it is showing, and then the form G. Okay? Now, when we tell it to continue running, it's going to get everything done. And at that point, here's my main form, and here are the other 2 chart displays that we created. Now, of course, the 2 new forms that we created, we didn't tell them what data they should have or anything, so they're just basic empty charts, okay? All right, so, and now you could say, well, this is not really how you would want to do it. The way you would really want to do this thing is to say, hey, for each var fn, so file name, in open file dialog load ticker dot file names, okay? So all that I'm doing here is say, hey, go through each file name, and for each file name, create a chart and display it. Do you agree that that's the one little change we had to make here? All that we're doing here in the file OK is we say, okay, the user has just selected some number of files. We now fall into file OK. What do we want to do in file OK? We want to loop through each one of the file names. That's why I do for each. And I don't want to know, I know it should be able to figure it out. So for each variable fn in open file dialog load ticker file name. So going through all the file name would mean that what would be the type of fn? We're going to
String.
a string, okay? So for each fn, which is a string, all that I'm doing here, I'm creating a new chart display and I'm showing the chart display. Notice I am not passing any other information. I just wanted to see if, okay, if I choose, let's say, 3 files or 1 file, what is this thing going to do? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop running this thing and I'm going to run it without the debugger. We don't need the debugger. And we'll try different scenario. I'm going to say load stock and I'm only going to pick 1 file. And boom, it created 1 chart, which presumably would be for that chart, okay? Now, one thing, if you wanted to be a bit more specific, you could say, hey, I want to know what I'm doing, so I'm going to create the form f, and I'm going to say f.text is equal to fn. I want to set up the file name, okay? So I'm not only going to bring up that new form, but I'm also going to tell that new form, hey, I want to know what file you're supposed to be associated with. Does that make sense? Okay, so nothing different than before. I'm creating the form. I'm going to display the form on line 31, but before I do it, I'm going to set the text of that form to the file name. So for each file name that I choose, I should have a form with that name. So here I'm only picking aal.month, and here it is, and this guy says, yes, this is with aal.month. Okay, I can close it, and then I can say load stock again. This time, I'm gonna do a bunch of AAL, okay? So I'm gonna say AAL day, month, week, and AAPL. I say okay, and boom, what did I get? I got this one, this guy, which is AAL week. Here's AAL day, here's AAL month, and then there was the last one, which was AAL day again. Okay? So, and if I close, notice one thing. If I close one of these windows, that window dies. That's it. Okay? But if I close the parent window, there's always a parent-child relationship between windows. When you bring up a window, it's because some other Windows code made it happen. So the parent of all these windows is our main window here. When you kill the main window, boom, it kills the parent, everything else. Okay?
Is that okay though?
Oh yeah, I mean, let's say you were looking at 20 stocks, and you got now the main window, and you have 20 other charts. And you say, okay, I'm done. Do you want to have to go, oh my God, I got to close each window individually? Or do you want to be able to say, I'm done, I'm closing the main window, and boom. Now, here's something cooler. I mean, sometimes you give people a little bit of power and they don't realize what they've done. So let's see what we've done here that indeed is cool. Especially talking about children. After all, do your children end up having children? Yeah, that's why we got grandparents and so forth. So let's see this happening. I say load stock, okay? Let's not be too much here. I just did those two, okay? Well, these two forms, which is like our previous form, oh, I didn't do any attachment to this, but you could make it that when you click on button 1 or something, they could create more forms. They could behave just like that first form if you wanted. So now you would have a parent form that created children form, and the children form could spawn children of their own. So now what happened, if you clear the top parent, it kills everybody. But if you kill one of the children, it will only kill that line of progeny, I can call it. I should kill, close. Okay, so here we're good. So here's what I want you to think over the weekend. It's the following. I am opening these other charts, but they don't display anything. Now, if you remember, in the first project, when you brought up your chart, okay, what did it have to do as soon as you knew the name of the file? What did you end up doing? Huh? Read? Okay, I need one person to raise their hands because go ahead.
Read.
You read the file in order to get back a list of candlesticks. Then what did you do with that list of candlesticks?
Bind the data?
Well, you didn't bind it first because what you got was a list of, let's say, 5,000 candlesticks. You didn't want to display that. You filtered it based on the date. I mean, all you have to do is look at your code. It's just like one line. You read the data. I think it was in something called load ticker, which went ahead, created a stream, or you had a stock reader, which you said, hey, go read the data and give me back a list of candlestick. Then you say, okay, I have the list of candlestick. One thing you did, you checked if the dates were in the proper order because you might have had to reverse. So one of the lines you have is to reverse, okay? After you reverse, you said, okay, I don't want to display the whole thing. I want to display only between two dates, so you did the filter. After you did the filter, what did you do?
Binded the candlestick?
Yeah, you bound it, or maybe before, because you could do it after or before, you normalized. You found out, hey, for that sub list that I got now between this date and this date, what's the minimum and what's the maximum, so that I can make the chart look right, okay? Not a tiny sliver of stuff, but use the whole range. So we normalized, then we bound it. But essentially, to be able to do all of that, you had to have your data. So now, the question is this. My main form, okay, the one that we come up with when we start, okay, this guy here. It knows all the files that you want. What do you think we should do? Such as, we have all the names. Should we read the data, and once we have our list, create the new chart, and then pass it the data, pass it the start and date, in order for it to be able to do its own filtering and everything. Or even more efficiently, we could say, hey, my main form, I don't want it to have to do any kind of extra work. When you say load stock, and you get your open file dialog will come back with an event, file OK, and you will know, hey, I have 10 files. Maybe all you want to do at that point is say, hey, all I'm going to do now, I'm going to create the new chart, one for each file name, and I'm just going to tell the new chart, here's the file name, here's the start date, here's the end date. And leave the new chart, go read the data, filter the data and everything, and display it. Which one do you think would make more sense, be more efficient? Yes?
Let the chart display, pass all the data to the chart and let the chart filter the data, because if we pass the filtered data and then they change the dates, we don't have the data.
Yeah, exactly. So what we will do, or what you will want to do now, is to say, hey, this guy is not going to do much. It's just going to gather from the user which file they want to look at, and this guy will say, oh, you want to look at 10 files? No problem. I'm going to make 10 charts, but we got to think of a way of passing to each one of these charts what file it's going to have to go read, and what start date, end date it's going to need to look at. What do you think is the best way to do this?
You could modify the constructor for form chart display to take parameters.
You're 95% correct. You had one extra word, modify the constructor. No, you don't have to modify the default constructor. You can just say, I'm going to add another constructor. Okay? So you still have your default constructor, which is kind of what we had there, brings up, because you never know, you might want to create an array of things. I mean, why do you need a default constructor? Like, if you want to create an array of something, of object, then the only way those objects are constructed is by default, okay? So you need a default constructor if you want to be able to create arrays of some class, okay? So what we will want to do is say, hey, in this display guy here, okay, and we can go into that particular display's constructor, but we need to go and find the constructors, where the constructor is for this. Okay, once we do find it, we will be happy. I really don't like this because there's so much confusing thing. Chart display. Okay, here's the chart display. Okay, the chart display CS. Right now, all we have is this. Okay, the default constructor. What we will want to do is say, hey, we need another constructor so that we can construct one of these charts in a different way. And what will we want to pass in this case? And by the way, whatever other constructor you do, if you want to follow, because remember, you are working within a framework. They set up a whole bunch of things for you so that if you follow certain conventions, everything works smoothly. If you don't, you die, okay? Notice that in the constructor, they say initialize component. Well, any form that you get that's derived from the form class, okay, and that's what our guy is, our form chart display. Whatever constructor you create, make sure that the first thing you do is initialize component. It needs that to take care of all. And then you can add whatever you want, okay? And it's complaining because I'm saying default constructor when there's already one, but we are going to fix that. So instead of a default constructor, this is one where, remember, we're gonna pass it a string, which let's say call it file path, okay? And what else did we say we were gonna need to pass it?
Start date and end date.
That's right, so those are gonna be date, time, although, is it really what we're using? Are we using date, time, or are we using date? I go back to my candlestick class to make sure, and, it's a date, time. Okay, very good, let's go here, let's say, let's pass it a date, time, which is gonna be a start date, and let's pass it another date, time, which is going to be our end date. Okay? Do we agree that this is one way to do it? Yes.
So is date, I forget what it's called, not,
What?
so you know when a class inherits from another class, what is that called?
Okay, so when a class does what with another class?
Inherits from another class, what is that called?
That's a derivation.
Derivation. Is date time a derivation of date?
No, the derivation here is the fact that the form chart display is derived from the form class.
That's not what I'm asking. Is the date time class a
Oh, yeah.
derivation of the date class? Because it
No,
works
I
with-
don't think that the date time is a derivation of the date. I think that, in here we have the date time,
Because one thing is, for the chart,
mhm.
you can set the x value to take date,
Uh-huh.
but works with the date time.
Well,
that you have
no,
for candlestick.
because, the X value that's part of the chart, I guess that what it can do, it can convert from one to the other. That
Okay.
if you say I have a date, and you set your date equal to something that is a date time, it may realize that, okay, of the date time, I'm just gonna take the date part and copy it. Okay, it's like you can, I guess you can convert a float to an integer by just chopping off, what comes up to the decimal.
Okay.
So right now, though, we're gonna pass this, and here's the thing, we only have a few minutes left, but you would say, okay, what would we wanna do at that point in the constructor? Well, imagine, when you are in this constructor, and you're being passed that, remember in project one? It's as if in project one, you had been in a file, okay, and you had already read the list of candlesticks, okay? Here, you don't have to go read, well, here you will have to go read, so in here, what you have to do is, now that you have the file tab, you're gonna do the things that you did in project one, which was, oh, I know what the file name is, I have to go read it, then you have to do what? You have to go reverse the list that you get back, after you reverse the list, you gotta have to filter the list, and then all of that wonderful jazz, so that's what you're gonna do here. And also, you will want to specify in this form display what the values of your two start date are. So, date, time, picker. So in this form, there is, oh man, that's my typo. Date, time, picker. Is that how they call them, or with a lowercase d? Date, time, picker, what is, okay, so we're in chart display, let me take a look real quick. This is this guy, let's look at the property, and this is called, yeah, it's called date time picker one, we never really changed the name. This should be date time picker, let's say underscore start date, let me just do that right away. And I can just go now to the other guy, we'll be at the same place, so here it is, date time picker two, that's gonna be date time picker underscore and date. Okay, I have that, let me make sure this one is correct. I wanna be consistent, so instead of start with a lowercase, I'm gonna do with an uppercase. That's that. Now when I go to my code here, I can say date time picker underscore start date. Okay, and what are we going to change? We're gonna change its value to be equal to, and it's telling me, hey, start date looks good, all right? And I didn't do anything else, I just hit enter. It says, oh, you probably then wanna take the date, time, ticker, end date, take its value and set it to end date. Does that look right? Absolutely, so let's tab it, and it wrote that code for us. So, right now, just for testing stuff, we say, okay, when we create a new chart, we will be passing it all this information, okay? And we are indeed doing that. When you look here, we are now going to say, okay, as we go through things, we're gonna now have a constructor, but that constructor is going to be getting the file name, which we call fn. Okay, right here, I mean, if I wanted to be more specific, I could simply say, call the variable fn, and this, we say, okay, what we need to pass fn, okay, fn, now we change to Control Z, we call this file name, and then we want to also pass it the start date, and that is our open file dialog load ticker dot file. No, it's not that. It's of the thing we have. It's the date, time, ticker. It's probably also a small thing. Date, time, ticker. Oh, it hasn't changed the names yet. Okay, so let's leave it as date, time, ticker 1, and that would be the value. And we want to pass it the N1 too, so that's the date, time, ticker 2. Okay, and that would be the value. Okay, so right now, all we do, and for the text, I'm going to just say the file name, although we should really have that be done by the constructor, but that's okay. So right here, all we're doing is when file OK says, hey, they've chosen a bunch of files, and you say, fine, I'm going to go through each file, and for each file name, I'm just going to create a chart, but so that that chart can now do what we did in project 1, we're going to say, here's the file name, and here's the start and end date. Take care of things. Well, what will take care of things mean? We'll read the data, reverse it, the list of candlesticks you get back, reverse it, okay, and then filter it, normalize it, display a chart, okay? But right now, all that it's going to be doing, although I don't know how it's going to work, given that the names were not really changed, I expect that there's an error, but hey, it succeeded, no problem. Load stop, I say load stop, at this point, it's going to give me a certain number, so I'm going to say this one, this, and this one, I'm just doing 2 of them, I hit enter, and boom. It now has 2. And on top of that, it now has the dates that were chosen for me. Just give me 1 second here so that we can make sure it's actually working. I'm going to change this date to 2020, it doesn't matter. And then when I say load, okay, and I pick 2 guys, the date should be now, yeah, 2020 over here, and for this other one, it's also 2020. So essentially, what we've done now is when we get the file okay, we said no problem, we got a bunch of files, we're gonna go through each file. For each file, I'm gonna open a new chart. But I need that new chart to do what our original chart did in project 1. It needs to go read a file, do the reverse, do the filter, do the normalization. But how does it know which file to get? Well, the way we do that is when we construct it, we pass it the file that the constructor is gonna go read and do everything about. And then, how does it know what dates range to display? Well, we pass that information in the start and end date, coming from the first form's start and end date value. Does all that make sense? Yeah, and it's pretty much project 1, but now we have it because we want multiple files. We have one user interface form that only wants to know what are the files you want and what is the start and end date. Give me that information, and now we'll go create a bunch of forms that are very much like the form of our first project. And those forms will take care of reading and doing everything else. And they'll be able to do more. Okay? So think about that.